Hello and welcome to Chronicle. Today a huge amount of updates and changes were teased that are coming into effect on the game on the 13th of July. We're going to do two videos about this. The first video is this one. It's going to be talking about the changes to the existing cars in the game. There's lots of rebalancing. The second video will be talking about all of the awesome new Morvran cars that are going to be announced. Morvran is the new legend. I've done a video on it previously. Let's begin. The first card we're going to be looking at is Black Knight Titan. This change was really needed, as the previous version of the card, which you should see on the screen currently, is crazily overpowered. Before, the effect was to strike your rival with their weapon, then remove that weapon from the rival. So, in effect, you got an exhaust-free strike and you completely removed your opponent's weapon, which is just an insane swing in power. I mean, that if you were playing Linza or something, you can be building up your weapon for the entire chapter or more than one chapter, and then it's suddenly gone. It's been used against you, and your opponent has got an strike without you exhausting themselves, so they can go into something in the next slot with no problem at all. Now, the effect is still to strike with your opponent's weapon, but you also exhaust yourself, and you don't remove your opponent's weapon. So, this is a really welcome change in my opinion, as it means that building up weapons is a lot more viable. And even more importantly perhaps, the strike now is has the exhaust mechanic added to it, which means it's not a free strike. Also, Black Knight Titan has had its stats increased, so it's a bit harder to hit. Before it was only on 5 health, now it's higher. So it's still a useful card. You're still going to do a metric shit ton of damage, and it still merits as an anti-linza card because you're going to be dealing more damage the bigger weapon they've got, and you're still going to be removing 1 durability from your rival. The second change we're going to be talking about is one of a number of nerfs to Ariane: Earth Blast. First, the cost has been reduced. That's the good news. The effect has also been reduced, so it now only works based on the number of support cards you have in your hand, rather than just the total number of cards you have. As Ariane plays mostly support cards anyway, you can say that this card has had its damage removed by, or reduced, should I say, by 60 to 75% of what it previously was. But because it's only now 6 gold, you can play 2 of them in a chapter much easier than before. I personally think this is a quite good balance because it still has great burst damage potential, but you're no longer capable of dealing a ludicrous 20 damage per slot, which just was insane. The next Ariane card to be nerfed is Enfeeble. I say nerfed. It was a 0 cost card, and now it's a 1 cost card, so it's a small change, not massive, not much to say about that one. The next card is Kale. My, what a change. Kale was one of the most played cards in the game, as it gave a 4-2 weapon with pretty much 0 risk. You could play it from chapter 1, which made it one of the few auto-include cards in the game. Now, it looks like so. It's still a minimal risk card. It's only got 2 health, you can hit it very easily, and it now gives an armor reward, but no weapon. Kale is now one of the only cards in the game to reduce the health of multiple creatures at once. This means that you can use it to ramp up and hit two big monsters instead of just 1, but combos which were previously all over the place, such as Kale then Jad from 3 AP, it just won't work anymore. Now, to play a Jad from using Kale, you have to do something like Kale and then Count Drain or then Jad, which is not very effective. The card will still see play, I'm sure of that, but I can't really see it being anywhere near as widespread as it currently is. It can still be found in useful combos, you still be able to put it in a deck and make good use out of it, but it's no longer an auto-include card, which I think is a good thing for the game overall. Gazage Tournament. Well, this is a major change, so it's still 0 cost. It still has a 1 gold reward, but the effect is the big difference. Before, it was giving your rival 3 gold. Now it gives them 1 base attack. 1 base attack is worth a lot more 3 gold, so this seems like a major nerf at first, but it's not as bad as you might think. The meta is about to change very heavily to gold decks, or gold heavy decks, and things that use a lot more support cards, thanks to the Redbeard Frank change, which we'll discuss later in the video. So not giving your opponent gold is potentially quite a good thing. You're not going to be building them up when they're already going to be using it to do damage against you in, say, for instance, a GoldZan deck. But also, if you say against a 1 AP Ariane, you're going to boost them to 2 AP, their cards are not going to activate, it's going to screw up their gameplay. Similarly, there's going to be a minor boost to cards that run off your rival's attacks, such as Ice Hill and Ogre Chieftain, and this is the only game, as far as I'm aware, that gives base attack to your opponent, which is an effect worthy of a diamond card. One thing you will have noticed from these two diamond changes is that the card effects are radically different to any other card in the game. This is not by accident, it's by design. Diamond cards should not be simply more powerful version of existing cards, as is previously the case with cards such as Lady Zay, which is just a much better version of Scorpion. But instead they should be powerful but situational cards with interesting and unique effects that you design your game around. You can see another of this balancing methodology from our next card, Morvran. Morvran has undergone a complete overhaul. It no longer resembles the previous +3 health to your rival's next creature deal 2 damage version. Right now, it clones a copy of your next monster and then makes that monster on your side aggressive. Seems like a nerf? Nope. This is no longer an auto-include card like Hail and Kazaj Tournament previously was, but the effect is still incredibly powerful. Think about using this with cards such as Hope Devourer and Dust Devil, allowing you to grief an extra AP and grief them far more consistently. Hell, even cards such as the new Kale or Kandrain or Dagannath Sentinel will really benefit from being cloned, and making them aggressive is not too much of a problem. That said, you do have to think carefully before adding this into a deck, which, as I just mentioned, is how diamond cards should be. Making your monster aggressive can really hurt you, but it will also combo nicely with some of the new Morvran cards that are going to be released on the 13th with Morvran, and I'll be talking about them in my next video. So a quick break from all the diamond card changes, and we'll go back to the Ariane nerfs and talk about Lady Giefing. Giefing is now a 2 gold cost with a healing effect that is much reduced. The healing effect previously worked on all of the cards in your hand. Now it's on all of the monsters that you have in your hand. It's quite a big nerf because Ariane tends to play mostly support cards, mostly spells, doesn't have any monsters. So this is it's a really big nerf, and I'm not entirely sure that this was necessary. Yes, Giefing could heal up to 20 health in one slot, but not very often. I haven't very often seen Giefing being used to that effect. Normally, when I see it used, it will heal maybe 10 or 12, maybe 14. It doesn't really heal the full 20. And this is going to make it heal even less. And combined with all of the other Ariane nerfs that are happening on this day, I'm not sure if this was a good decision. Back to the diamond cards, and we'll talk about Vanescula. I was experimenting with a previous version of this card in a Vanescula deck that was based around sealing health. It really wasn't playable. It's just stats were just far too high. It's 14 health, 7 attack. You're not going to be able to one-hit that, which means you have to tank damage. You can't build up armor with Vanescula, which means it's going in your health. Then your own health is going to be reduced by half. That meant you play this card, you're going to be on around 10 health or less, which is an incredibly vulnerable position, and you can be killed so easily from it. If you don't have any health regen or any steel, it's just not going to work. So the new version is very, very different. The first thing to notice is much lower stats, which means you can hit it a lot easier, but the effect is also completely different. It doesn't affect your rival's health anymore. It doesn't halve your health. Instead, it sets your maximum health. So no longer will your maximum health go up to 30, it will only go up to 15. Any heals you do when you're on 15 health will in effect stay at 15. It then gives a ton of armor for you to defend yourself. Now, this means that after this card, you will always be in mortal range, which for Vanescula is great for damage output. Things like Alpha Werewolf will always be hitting 8 damage. Your Gorge is always doing 6. You'll be able to go straight into things like Full Daruk, always getting your 2 base attack. But also, quite importantly, you'll always be able to activate successfully Certification and bring up your armor even more. Now, this is really the only way, in my opinion, to play this card, because Vanescula doesn't have much armor generation, and when you're only on 15 health as a maximum, you really need armor to defend yourself and burst damage. So, if you've got that card, if you got both Vanescula and Certification and a few other armor cards and a few other mortal ones, you'd be able to make a really aggressive, effective mortal deck around this. If you don't have them, probably not going to see much play. But still, it's a very interesting card. The previous version was just never played because it's too bad. This one at least has a specific use and will be quite good. So, quite a nice change. Now, Redbeard Frank. I had just crafted this card. So, to see it change so completely was a bit of a surprise. I was expecting some major changes, but I wasn't expecting all of its gold grief to be removed. The previous version was remove all gold from both legends and draw 2 cards, which was an incredibly powerful card. I mean, it was a hard counter to GoldZan decks and other decks which relied on large amounts of gold, such as Spellbook Linzas, Spellbook Arianes, Big Hand Arianes using Earth Blast and similar. It's also quite effective against things like Grief Linza, where you'd be building up lots of gold to use on your full Tetsu and your Tetsu Katana. So gold grief was a major component of the game because of Redbeard Frank. So now that's gone completely, the meta's going to change drastically. But because it was so effective, no one really ran GoldZan. So that's why it's gone. That's why the gold grief is gone. Now the card's been completely removed. It's gone all the way down to 3 health, which means you can hit it really easily. And then when you do hit it and kill it, you draw a pirate and a ship from your deck, and then you add a cannonball to your hand. So it will fit very nicely into things like a Lady A deck, because you're immediately going to draw your Lady A, or if you're and a pirate, then to use it or bring more cannonballs out, or you could play your Redbeard Frank, and then you know that you've definitely got a ship in your hand, so you can do something like 50 ships move faster and gain 5 gold. It makes that card a lot more playable. So this card will definitely see use, but a lack of gold grief is just going to change the meta so much. How the game is going to progress from now is anyone's guess. Moving on to the next card, which is another Ariane nerf. Yep, it's another Ariane nerf. It's Skeletal Peon. Who would have thought a Skeletal Peon would have been one of the cards to be nerfed? Who really thinks, oh my god, I would have won that game if they didn't use their Skeletal Peon? Well, it was on 2 health. Now it's on 3. Was this needed? Well, maybe not. Is the card still playable? Yes. Will it affect the game too much? No, not really. Moving on. Stagger! 4 cost? No longer. AP removal? Not from your rival. This now exhausts you. Confused? Well, I think you should be. The card is very strange now, but it does open up a few new combos. For instance, Ariane has a lot of cards which work off 1 base attack, such as Wind Surge. However, if you want to play these cards, you are probably better off playing a dedicated 1 attack Ariane deck, or exhausting yourself using things such as Demon Strikes, where you're at least then getting another effect instead of just exhausting yourself. However, feel free to prove me wrong, create a deck around this. I'll be experimenting with it myself because it is quite an interesting card. But yeah, I don't think this will see much use. Smoke Barrage. As a quick reminder, this is one of the 4 cards that you get from the Ancient Spellbook. Previously, it's removed attack from your next monster and 1 base attack from your rival. So it was a grief, and it also allows you to ramp up a little bit and attack big monsters without losing so much health. Now it does something completely different. It does damage to your rival, and it discards a card from their hand. This is no doubt a nerf. It's probably needed as well. It meant that Ancient Spellbook now contains no grief. It just does damage and the cards that allow you to hit bigger monsters on your side of the board. So Ariane now has no AP removal, which means Linza is now the undisputed queen of grief. But more importantly, Ancient Spellbook now stands in stark contrast to the Lunar Spellbook, which is still all about grief. So the 2 spellbooks are now a lot more distinct, and they're going to have different playstyles emerging from both of them. So that's probably useful. Talking about Lunar Spellbook gives me a seamless segue into Vengeance. This is a simple change. It was deal damage to your rival of your hand size plus 4. Now it's deal damage to your rival of your hand size. So it's probably a much welcome change, to be honest. The plus 4 damage did make it a bit too powerful, but the card is still very playable. It's still going to deal a lot of damage, so I think this is a welcome change. Next up we have Zamorakian Cultist. Now this is both a buff and a nerf. The buff being that its attack has been reduced, so it makes it a lot easier to hit, a lot less susceptible to grief. The nerf is that instead of giving 2 asphyxiates, it gives 1, so that's a fairly major decrease. But that is again welcome in dungeoneering. 2 asphyxiates will just completely screw up your opponent's game. And 1 asphyxiate will still do a lot of damage. It does twice your rival's next creature's attack. That's potentially 30 damage. It's huge. 2 of them was just too powerful, and the fact that it is now easier to hit means that you might see it played a lot more in constructed, where previously there was just far better options for Ariane, and well, now especially with all the other Ariane nerfs, this might well see use. So it's one to watch out for. Bit of a nerf, bit of a buff. Let's find out. Last but by no means least, we have the much anticipated change to Lady Zay. This is a major nerf, and whilst the nerf was certainly needed, I feel they might have gone a little too far. Damage from Lady Zay previously ranged from 3 to 33, depending on how many cannibals you had in hand. It now ranges from 0 to 20. So the damage is reduced by slightly over a third, and you need cannibals to play it. It can be a dead card if you don't get the cannibals. As I mentioned earlier, the change to Red Beard Frank means that you're now able to play this a little more consistently, but the damage nerf is really quite hard. You're only dealing 2 damage per cannibal. There are 2 other cards in the game that deal damage directly from cannibals: Sticky Sanders and Barcatoad. Sanders does 4 damage per cannibal, but you're only spending 1 at once, but you are getting Sanders back, so you can keep on using Sanders chapter after chapter. And Barcatoad does 7 damage, which is a huge swing. So Zay now is really doing between a quarter and half the damage per cannibal of the other cannibal spending cards, which is, well, it's a lot less. The nerf was undisputably needed. Zay was far too rampant in the meta, it's far too powerful, but I feel they might have gone too far. I'm not sure exactly how they should correct it, but there should be a halfway health. I know Interjections previously talked about making a requirement to use Zay of spending pirates. That might be a way of doing it, but I feel if you're going to be spending turn after turn or slot after slot, building up cannibals, you can only gain 3 at once. Most of the time you're only gaining 2 at once, unless you're playing something like Cabin Boy, then yeah, you're going to spend a lot of time building up those cannibals, and you could spend them more effectively on other cards. So, not sure if this is going to see much use anymore, but it was needed. Right, that's all we have for the changes to the currently announced cards. Let me know if I've missed anything, or if you think something's wrong, or you spotted a combo that I haven't, and all that sort of thing. Drop a comment in the section below. The next video will be a bit more interesting because it's all about new cards for Morvran. They're all announced. There's going to be a couple more that are not released on 13th of July that they're still tweaking, but the vast majority of them will be covered in the next video. So stay tuned for that, it's going to be great.